Good morning, everyone. My name's Bob Adler. I'm the acting chair of the Consumer Product Safety Commission. I want to welcome everybody to the annual public hearing on the Commission's agenda and priorities for fiscal year 2021. We realize that today's hearing is being held under unusual circumstances due to the coronavirus crisis, but we hope to gain as much information and insight into our stakeholders' concerns as possible. We want to thank all of those who submitted comments and recommendations to us. I certainly read them carefully, and I'm sure my fellow commissioners have as well. We particularly want to thank those who will present testimony today. And by the way, we hope that all who are listening are safe and well. This hearing is being held pursuant to Section 4J of the Consumer Product Safety Act, which requires that before CPSC establishes an agenda and priorities for action in an upcoming fiscal year, we must conduct a public hearing on the agenda and priorities and provide a reasonable opportunity for the public to submit comments on them. We're delighted to do so because we can't function properly without knowing what members of the public care about and wish us to work on. Accordingly, again, we're grateful to our panelists as well as those who've submitted written comments. Because presenters cannot see who at the Commission will be directly involved in today's hearing, let me introduce them to you. First and foremost, let me mention the CPSC commissioners. In seniority order, we have Commissioner Elliott Kay, Commissioner Dana Biacco, and Commissioner Peter Feldman. After your presentations, I'm sure the commissioners will have a number of questions for you. In addition, I should mention that our Executive Director, Mary Boyle, our General Counsel, Gib Mullen, and our Head of the Office of the Secretary, Alberta Mills, will be online during the proceedings. General Counsel Mullen will monitor the hearing to make sure we're complying with the Sunshine Act, and Secretary Mills will monitor the clock. Of course, CPSC staff and the general public are listening as well, although they will be muted. Each presenter will have 5 minutes to deliver their comments, and each commissioner will then have 5 minutes for questions for each panel. In order to simplify things, we will not have presenters or commissioners on video. Panelists' microphones will be muted when their panel is not making a presentation. We've provided those who wish to use PowerPoint slides the opportunity to do so. If you're using slides, please indicate when you wish to move to the next slide by stating, "Next slide, please." Because we will not have green, yellow, or red lights to guide the presenters' times, Secretary Mills will give a 1 minute orally and then time's up. As I said, following the presenters on each panel, each commissioner will have 5 minutes for questions of the panel. Given time considerations, we're going to be able to have just one round of commission questions for each panel. I should add, no one should feel obligated to use all their time. As they say, brevity is the soul of wit. We'll hear from the first two panelists this morning, and then for technical reasons, we're going to take a 1 hour lunch break. We have shortened the time for presentations and commission questions from 10 minutes to 5 minutes. And to compensate for that, we're going to keep the record open for 2 weeks following today's hearings. So speakers will be welcome to supplement their testimony, and commissioners will be free to submit follow-up questions to panelists. So with that, I will call on the first panel, which should consist of Dr. Benjamin Hoffman and I believe Dr. Sarah Goza from the American Academy of Pediatrics, followed by Dr. Diana Zuckerman, National Center for Health Research, followed by Ms. Rachel Weintraub, Consumer Federation of America, and Mr. William Wallace, Consumer Reports. That will be the first panel. And with that, I call on our first panelists, either Dr. Hoffman or Dr. Goza or both. Thank you. Dr. Hoffman, are you there?
I am indeed. I was just unmuted. Good morning, Acting Chairman Adler, Commissioners Biacco, Feldman, and Kay. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Dr. Ben Hoffman, and I am here on behalf of the American Academy of Pediatrics, or AAP, where I serve as the chair of the AAP Council on Injury, Violence, and Poison Prevention. I must mention, I believe I'm the only panelist on the West Coast, and it is just 7 o'clock, so I will do my best. I think I've had enough coffee to make this work. The work of the CPSC is all the more important in this difficult time. The AAP deeply appreciates the opportunity to make recommendations to the agency's priorities for the next fiscal year. I've heard a number of harrowing stories from pediatrician colleagues who are seeing an uptick in severe injuries to children since shelter-in-place began, as the children they care for spend more time at home with parents who are often working or preoccupied with financial stress or other distractors. In regards to safe sleep, the AAP appreciates the CPSC's work over the last 2 years to propose 2 crucial safety standards that will create safer sleep environments for children throughout this country. Finalizing these standards expeditiously should be a marquee priority. The safest sleep environments for infants are cribs, bassinets, portable cribs, or play yards that conform to CPSC mandatory safety standards. Infants should always sleep on their back in their own space on a flat and firm sleep surface, free of any crib bumpers, soft bedding, or other products. The AAP strongly supports CPSC's proposed rule on infant safe sleep products, and we urge you to finalize it quickly and with the soonest possible effective date. The AAP also appreciates the agency's progress on crib bumpers. Crib bumper products have no place in a safe sleep environment and pose a significant suffocation hazard. The continued presence of dangerous and unnecessary crib bumpers in the marketplace puts infants at unnecessary risk and jeopardizes the clarity of CPSC and AAP public health messaging. In regard to liquid nicotine is a highly toxic product that poses a serious risk of negative health effects and death for children. With children spending more time at home, sometimes with limited and or distracted supervision from parents and caregivers, it's no surprise that we've seen an increase in calls to poison centers. It's all the more important for the CPSC to fully endorse the Child Nicotine Poisoning Prevention Act of 2015 to prevent liquid nicotine poisoning. We urge the Commission to place a significant emphasis on taking public action to enforce this law. Regarding furniture tip-overs, the AAP appreciates CPSC's attention to recalling clothing storage units that pose serious risk of injury from tipping over on children. The best solution for this preventable and tragic problem is simply to require safer dressers that will not tip over. I personally care for a number of families who own dressers that have been implicated and whose landlords prohibit the installation of anti-tip furniture anchors. The Academy has endorsed the Sturdy Act, and we look forward to a robust mandatory standard to prevent this hazard. In regards to high-powered magnets, the AAP remains strongly supportive of a ban on high-powered magnet sets due to the grave injuries caused when ingested in multiples. In a span of 3 months in 2019, as magnets returned to the market, surgeons in my own institution removed 31 magnets from the stomachs of young children. To prevent the known harms associated with these products, we urge the CPSC to reissue its recall order and establish a strong mandatory safety standard for small rare earth magnet sets. A mandatory standard would protect children and is necessary given the serious inadequacy of the current efforts within ASTM International to address this hazard. Finally, the AAP would welcome opportunities to work with the CPSC to address window falls, another child injury hazard we're seeing during the pandemic. We believe that windows more than 6 feet above exterior grade and with a sill height less than 42 inches above the interior floor should be required to incorporate passive fall prevention technology to protect children. Thank you again for the chance to testify today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you so much. Dr. Zuckerman, are you there?
Can you hear me? I am here, but I can't see anything.
No, you won't be able to see anything, but we can hear you just fine.
Okay, so I have slides, so I'm just hoping we can figure out which slides are on the screen while I'm talking. I'll do my best and I'll say next when it's ready. So if you've got my title slide, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. The next slide, National Center for Health Research is a nonprofit research center. We're staffed by scientists, medical professionals, and public health experts, and we do not accept funding from companies whose products we evaluate. Next. I'm going to be talking about a few different priorities that we think are really important for the Consumer Product Safety Commission. I'm going to speak again, as I did last year, about artificial turf and playground surfaces, and this year I'll also be talking about playground equipment. There's lead and risky chemicals in the crumb rubber and in the plastic grass, but also in the paint that is on these nice products that are on these playgrounds throughout our country. And crumb rubber is being replaced by other materials with unknown risks, and children are being exposed day after day and year after year. Next. I'm hoping you can see the slide of this beautiful playground on the left, and on the right, you see what the playground looks like when these materials start deteriorating. That red was a beautiful red surface, and it has worn off. Underneath, you can see the black tire crumb, and we've also seen places where the cement is showing, particularly at the bottom of slides. Next. So the athletic fields have a plastic grass with artificial infill made from tire waste, silica, or volcanic rock. The playgrounds have this colorful rubber that deteriorates. And even though lead is banned from indoor paint, apparently it is being used outdoors on the equipment that kids are climbing on and using every day. Next slide. What are the rubber and turf made out of? Again, you can see the black coming through. That's from the red was the surface, but the tire crumb is the black that is coming through. And the artificial turf, as well as the virgin rubber, includes things like hydrocarbons, aldehydes, phthalates, and VOCs. Next slide, please, which hopefully says these materials include endocrine disrupting chemicals that can cause attention deficits, early puberty, obesity, and cancer. And you can see there are two children playing in this black mess. That is tire crumb that has washed off from the artificial turf field and has washed off into the children's playground surface. Next. Here's a sign locally that we found. Tells children not to eat the infill mix. Obviously, it's good to have a sign warning them, but it would be better not to have infill that's so dangerous, because obviously young children are not going to be able to read that sign. Next. The material gets from the ground to the air. You see here, it's a photograph of BCC High School, which is across the street from the Consumer Product Safety Commission. That is material, the infill that is being put down on the field. But unfortunately, that infill will also come up into the air, but it will then be microscopic and you won't be able to see it. Next slide. The particulate matter gets into the air from the artificial turf. There are various studies on that. We can skip the next few slides. California EPA studies showing the VOCs and the PAHs. The NHANES studies, which shows that children who are exposed to PAHs are more likely to have asthma. Next slide. Which should say lead at urban and suburban school playgrounds. This has been found in this area, but we assume all over the country. A nonprofit scientific group found that 24% of DC samples of tire shred had lead levels over 1,951 parts per million. And since last year's Consumer Product Safety Commission meeting, the DC government has found lead dust on rubber playground surfaces for kids' playgrounds throughout the city. Next slide. So how did DC solve the lead problem at school playgrounds? They power washed it off. But the question is, where does the lead go when it's washed off, and where does the water go? Are they just moving the lead from one place to another where the kids will also be exposed? And of course, after it's washed, we can only assume that the lead dust is going to continue to accumulate. Okay, I will finish up. There are no tests. I just want to show the temperature slide. If you can see the one, it's called How Hot is This Artificial Turf? There's a 92 degree day in Washington, but the turf is 163 degrees. The next slide is 180 degrees on a playground. And I'm just going to keep going and just say that the organohalogen flame retardants also an issue that we believe should be a priority, and also helmets for sports and recreational activities, since the helmets currently are designed to prevent severe injuries, but not to prevent the mild concussions that are so much more common. Thank you very much.
And we
Appreciate it.
thank you. Your slides were easily seen and they were coordinated even if you couldn't see them. So we thank you for that. Ms. Rachel Weintraub.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. Please proceed.
Acting Chair Adler, Commissioners Bayoko, Feldman, and Kay, I appreciate testifying before you today. I hope you and your families and CPSC employees and their families are doing as well as they can during this difficult time. I am Rachel Weintraub, Legislative Director and General Counsel with Consumer Federation of America. CFA is a nonprofit association of approximately 280 pro-consumer groups that was founded in 1968 to advance the consumer interest through advocacy, research, and education. The CPSC's mission impacts every American every day to protect the public from injury or death associated with the use of consumer products, especially now when Americans have fundamentally shifted how they spend their time to being home. The work of the CPSC is as critical as ever. The CPSC's mission relies upon agency action, using all of its tools to issue mandatory standards, assess civil and criminal penalties, develop voluntary standards, conduct effective and timely recalls, and educate consumers. The use of these tools in combination best protects consumers, and we recommend a budget of $350 million for the agency to do its critical work. Please accept my written testimony into the record. Today, I will provide brief highlights from that submission. On infant sleep products, CFA strongly supports the language of the Commission's supplemental NPR of infant sleep products. We applaud that the scope is now infant sleep products, and we applaud the definition of infant sleep products. We urge that the agency recall all inclined sleep products from the market and urge the that the rulemaking become final as soon as possible. On crib bumpers, we appreciate the hearing held this year and urge the Commission to move forward with its recent action under Section 104 of the CPSIA to promulgate a mandatory standard for crib bumper pads that includes a permeability or airflow standard and a test method for the performance standard. On window coverings, the CPSC should monitor the marketplace to ensure that loopholes do not exist in the voluntary standard. The CPSC should prioritize reducing deaths and injuries from corded window coverings, monitor and ensure compliance in the marketplace, and immediately develop an effective voluntary standard that limits the strangulation risk posed by custom products. Regarding flame retardants in consumer products, we appreciate that the CPSC has voted to move forward on our petition, urging the CPSC to adopt mandatory standards to protect consumers from the health hazards caused by the use of some organohalogen flame retardants. We urge the Commission to take significant steps to reduce the risks posed by these chemicals. Regarding the Internet of Things and connected products, we urge the Commission to protect consumers from the risks posed by connected consumer products. While some interagency communications have begun and Commissioner Kay released a white paper, more clarity and enforcement actions are necessary to protect consumers. Regarding electric scooters, a January 2020 Journal of the American Medical Association article found that more than 39,000 electric scooter injuries were treated in emergency rooms across the U.S. between 2014 and 2018. The CPSC, however, has not, but should, release data on electric scooters and take action to monitor, investigate, track, and reduce incidents. Regarding high-powered magnet sets, in a January 2020 update, 6 times more magnet ingestions in 2019, nearly 1,600 cases were reported to U.S. poison control centers than in 2016. Current voluntary standard efforts involve warnings and changes to packaging, but we are concerned that these efforts are not sufficient to prevent the increase in magnet ingestion. We urge the CPSC to take immediate action to promulgate a strong mandatory standard to protect children. On laundry packets, in 2019, according to the American Association of Poison Control Centers, exposures increased to over 10,000 cases from 9,319 in 2018. We urge the CPSC to analyze the data to understand why the voluntary standard is not reducing the hazard and to move forward with an effective mandatory standard. Regarding recreational off-highway vehicles and all-terrain vehicles, We are concerned about the increasing number of ROV-related fatalities and recalls, and that more effective action is not being taken for known fire hazards and debris penetration. The voluntary standard for these vehicles must be reevaluated to address these hazards. We urge the CPSC to issue injury and fatality statistics annually for ROVs, and regarding ATVs, we urge the CPSC to complete the ATV rulemaking. Regarding civil and criminal penalties, it's a critical aspect of the CPSC's work, and we're disappointed to see no civil or criminal penalties in 2020. CPSC implementation should continue to be a high priority. On safer products, we urge the Commission to take additional action to improve the database, and we look forward to working with the Commission to achieve all of the goals we outlined today. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much, Ms. Weintraub. Will Wallace, are you there? Consumer Reports.
Yes, thank you. On behalf of the independent nonprofit Consumer Reports, thank you very much to everybody for the opportunity to testify today about the CPSC's priorities. Improving product safety has always been a core part of CR's mission, and it remains so today as we all manage the impact of the pandemic. With millions of people, and especially children, spending most of their time at home, the CPSC's work is as vital as ever. Not just for consumers, but also for the sake of a fairer marketplace in which companies benefit if they meet their responsibilities for their products to be safe. We commend the CPSC's expert staff for their dedication during this challenging period. We also thank the Commission for its leadership, and in particular for the creation of the new Consumer Ombudsman role. We look forward to working together. Under current circumstances, we understand that the agency's ability to carry out lab testing and other important activities is sharply limited. We further recognize that this comes on top of a status quo under which the agency lacks many of the tools and resources that it needs. Despite these limitations, it's critical for the CPSC to find creative solutions during this time, and for its people to do whatever they can do right now to help protect the public, while also staying safe themselves. At a foundational level, this means Commission members and agency staff should keep several priorities in mind. First, the CPSC should continue to advocate vocally for stronger safety protections and to communicate key safety messages clearly and frequently. We particularly appreciate the agency's work to speak out forcefully about the serious and potentially deadly risks of unstable furniture and infant sleep at an incline. We also thank the agency for its recent work to highlight home safety and outdoor safety hazards that people might be exposed to more frequently at present. Second, the CPSC should set a high bar for company safety culture, proactive safety measures, and responses to safety issues. The agency should repeatedly and consistently urge companies and industry associations to reach that high bar it sets for safety, which often means that the CPSC must push publicly and privately for them to take actions they don't want to take. And the CPSC should require companies to step up when they do not take sufficient action voluntarily. Part of this means strengthening the public expectations that the agency sets for recalls. Recalls should be both quick and complete and as seamless as possible for consumers to participate in. This also means the CPSC should hold companies accountable when they don't live up to their obligations under a recall or are ineffective at getting unsafe products off the market and out of homes. Third, the CPSC should push voluntary standard setting groups to address, expeditiously and completely, known hazards and gaps in protection that leave people at risk. There are many dedicated safety professionals who contribute their expertise toward voluntary standards. But there's an ugly and unavoidable truth. Lately, we have seen far too many voluntary standards groups utterly failing to put people's safety first or to act with the urgency that a product safety hazard demands. This is a broader problem that is not entirely within the CPSC's control, but it remains critical for CPSC staff to be vocal and for the Commission to back them up and support them when a standard or a standard setting process is not serving safety. Fourth, the CPSC should retain the credible use of mandatory standards, legal action to force compliance, and civil penalties at a level that serves as a deterrent. Fundamentally, it is critical for the CPSC to use its whole range of tools to protect the public. And where the agency requires enhanced authorities, Congress should know about it, especially now, nearly 12 years since passage of the CPSIA. Finally, CR strongly urges CPSC action on several matters in particular, which we highlight today but should not be considered exhaustive. The agency should finalize the strong safety standard for infant sleep products that it has proposed, which parents, safety groups, and at least 22,000 members of the public have urged the CPSC to implement. The CPSC should finalize its proposal to
1 minute
remove
remaining.
hazardous crib bumper pads from the marketplace. As access to its lab permits, the CPSC should prepare strong safety requirements for the stability of clothing storage units so that it can finalize those requirements as quickly as possible with enactment of the Sturdy Act. And the agency lastly should implement a strong safety standard for portable generators to address the risk of carbon monoxide poisoning and other safety risks associated with the products. And we understand that this too is dependent on access to the lab. In conclusion, CR greatly appreciates everyone at the CPSC's essential work to address hazards associated with consumer products, especially during these challenging times. We look forward to continuing to work with the agency and its staff to fulfill its mission in fiscal years 2021 and 2022. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wallace. We will now have a round of questions from the commissioners. I will commence, and each of us will have 5 minutes for questions. So Dr. Hoffman, if I might start with you. One of the things that strikes me about your testimony is that there's so many ways that children, our most vulnerable and involuntary risk takers, can be killed. They can be burned, they can fall, they can suffocate, they can be crushed, they can be poisoned. So obviously we owe an extra measure of care and concern for them. Let me ask you 2 quick questions. Since my son was born almost 40 years ago, there have been a lot of new sleep and baby holding products on the market that were not in existence when my son was young. So am I correct in saying that the AAP, when you're looking at any product that's intended for sleep, simply should not permit inclined sleep, or would there be some type of sleep product where inclined sleep would make sense?
Thank you for that question, Acting Chair Adler. To be quite frank, there is no way for an infant to sleep at an angle greater than 10 degrees in any safe way. A study that was commissioned by the CPSC and performed by biomechanical engineers at the University of Arkansas concluded that any angle greater than 10 degrees led to fundamental changes in muscle use for infants, and that inherently placed them at risk for adverse outcomes from sleep. There is no way for any inclined sleep product to be safe for an infant if it is greater than 10 degrees from horizontal.
Okay, thank you. And I have one other quick question. To date, the commission hasn't, on an annual basis, developed a statistically representative sample of magnet set injuries. We did years before, but then the 10th Circuit overruled our rule, which then permitted companies to re-enter the market. And if I understood your testimony, you say you have a sense that injuries are picking up as more sellers enter the market. Am I correct, at least impressionistically, that that's what you're seeing?
That is absolutely true. As I noted, in a span of just several months after the magnets returned to the market, surgeons and gastroenterologists at my own institution removed 31 magnets from 3 children.
I'm going to turn now to Dr. Zuckerman. You pointed out that the health and safety issues related to organohalogens used in flame retardants, and you support CPSC's continued efforts to address these products. So I wanted to ask a question that's been of concern to me. Based on research you're aware of, are you aware of any organohalogen flame retardant that, once it's been extensively tested, has been determined to present little or no risk?
No, thank you for asking that question. I'm not aware of any evidence of safety for any of these products. Now, sometimes there's a lack of research, so you don't know, but there's none of these products so far, to my knowledge, have been found to be safe. So it is very concerning, obviously, and we would be so grateful if the Consumer Product Safety Commission can really focus on these issues and how to reduce the exposures that our children and all adults are dealing with at this point.
So I'd like to make one quick observation to underscore a point you made. You correctly point out that we've never determined, CPSC has never determined crumb rubber to be safe. We continue to participate in government-wide research on crumb rubber, but we've made no finding about its hazard. So thank you for pointing that out and clearing up the record.
Thank
I
you.
did want to turn one other point of attention.
1 minute remaining.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to jump then to Ms. Weintraub, if I might. You've pointed out for years the hazards of riding all-terrain vehicles on paved roads. First of all, can you tell us why consumers should not be riding ATVs on paved roads? And can you tell us what progress you've made in convincing states and municipalities not to permit ATVs on paved roads?
Sure. The bottom line is that all-terrain vehicles, the term itself is a misnomer. They are not designed to be on all terrains. And in fact, there are warning labels which indicate that ATVs should not be ridden on roads. Unfortunately, that warning label, the fact that they are designed not to be on roads, is being undermined by the fact that states and municipalities are opening up. They are changing their laws. Many states provide discretion to municipalities. And while we are sort of have a process to identify as soon as we can when we hear of something moving in a state or municipality, county, township, we send letters, we participate if we can, we help to recruit folks to engage, but we are not always successful. I've not looked at our engagement and the results of our work this year. The best we can usually do is get a delay, but working especially with doctors across the country, with pediatricians who see the impact of children in particular riding on roads, we have a powerful coalition based on public health information urging municipalities not to expand permissible use of ATVs and ROVs to roads.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid my time is about to run out. Am I correct in that? Ms.
Time's
Miller?
up, yes.
Okay,
yes,
thank you.
Chairman.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wallace, I'm sorry I didn't get to ask my questions of you, but thank you for your testimony. I'd like to turn to Commissioner Elliott Kay. Commissioner Kay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the panelists for making this work, as well for the CPSC staff that have had to scramble to make this work. We're really glad we're able to do it. I wanted to ask actually an open-ended question for the panelists. I'm happy if you want to answer in order just for the sake of making it efficient. So starting with Dr. Hoffman and working through the panel. But the question is, none of you is new to this process. You've all testified now, some of you for many, many years in front of the commission. And of all the issues you've raised, I'm not sure actually there's any novel issues. I think every single issue that you've raised, unfortunately, is a repeat issue. And that's actually true for most of the panelists for the whole day. And so the question for you all is, and it might seem like a peculiar question, is how do we change the dynamic around product safety so that we don't have to keep having this hearing every year covering the same issues over and over again? And I'm sure in your minds you're thinking, well, that's easy, just do your jobs. I wish it were that simple. I can tell you, I'm obviously not going to speak for all of my colleagues, but I can tell you that it's not for a lack of will at the agency to try to address these problems. I think that there needs to be some additional dynamic that changes to not have to have these repeat issues continue to plague consumers. And I'm curious to know what you might suggest to change those dynamics, starting with Dr. Hoffman, please.
Thank you, Commissioner Kay. I think that is a very complex question, but absolutely necessary. I'm probably the newest to this process, having served for 5 years as the chair of my council at the AAP. I think especially in regards to products for children, I think that the system undervalues the lives of kids. I think that is one of the sad truths that I live as a pediatrician every day. There's a quote from a colleague of mine that pediatricians are the ultimate witnesses to failed social policy. And I think especially in regards to consumer products, that is strikingly true. With the fact that we lose 10 babies a day in the United States to sleep is really tragic. The fact that there are encumbrances within the system, including Rule 6B, that really favor industry over the lives of children in terms of being able to get information out is a huge barrier. As I have become more aware and more facile with the standard setting process, I feel that the system as it exists, especially within the ASTM, again, favors industry over the needs of consumers and the public. I would love to see some shift, some emphasis on bringing the voices of advocates and the community to the process, and also a fundamental shift in the way that we address products. And I think we discussed this when I was lucky enough to come to present around crib bumpers, this idea that there's an assumption among the public that products are safe, and that if something is sold, it has gone through some process. And I think there needs to be a fundamental shift in the way that we address that. I appreciate your comment that it is not for a lack of will within the commission. It is not for a lack of will within the advocacy community either.
1 minute remaining.
But if the system does not allow us to actually protect the people we're supposed to protect, we're doomed. And I apologize for taking up so much time.
Thank you for that. Any other panelists want to jump in the last 44 seconds?
Sure. This is Dr. Diana Zuckerman. I just want to say that I think one of the big issues is waiting for clear evidence. And so often there isn't clear evidence because there's no research. And so, whichever of these issues we're talking about, we shouldn't be counting, how many kids died from this. We should be looking at how can we prevent any children from dying from this. And when the evidence is already there that there's lead, that there's toxic chemicals, that there are, children swallowing products or dying from their sleep products, we shouldn't be waiting for the clear numbers of what the evidence is. We need to move more quickly.
Thank you for that. And my time, unfortunately, has expired. So hopefully, Ms. Weintraub and Mr. Wallace, we can continue this conversation at a different time.
Thank you. And I would note again that the record will be open for 2 weeks for additional submissions. And that's a wonderful question from Commissioner Kaye. So we would invite responses there. Turn now to Commissioner Biacco.
Thank you, Acting Chair Adler, and thank you to everyone for making this work. I think that under the circumstances, this is about the best we can do, and I'm glad you were all able to participate. Also, Commissioner Kaye, thank you for your point. I couldn't agree more. I do think that the CPSC focuses on many of these issues long-term, and the purpose of this particular hearing is to look for specific priorities in 2021 and 2022. So I would encourage everyone, including this panel and future panels, to come and see us and talk to us about specific products that we aren't already addressing. I can assure you, Dr. Hoffman, that I care about the lives of children. I don't agree with some of your comments on whether the system favors one group versus another. And I will give you a couple thoughts on this point. First of all, on magnets, I personally support a mandatory rule on magnets. I'm very disappointed that after all the time and years spent on this issue that the petition was recently withdrawn. And once that occurs, we effectively start over, and that's very unfortunate. Some of the issues that are raised here today, we don't have jurisdiction over. For example, Ms. Weintraub's discussions about ATVs and the municipal rules. We all know ATVs are not designed to be used on pavement. What a municipality does as far as its own internal rules, we don't have jurisdiction over. And that is unfortunate to the extent that we are focused on some of these safety issues. Our hands are tied, as everyone knows, on the consumer product itself. Dr. Hoffman, I have a question specifically for you on inclined sleeps. I just want to make sure I understand sleepers, I'm sorry, inclined sleepers. One of the points I want to ask is the 10% incline. The danger there is because of positional asphyxiation risks. Is that correct?
Thank you, Commissioner Biacco, for your comments and for the question. I think there are several issues associated with an incline greater than 10 degrees. Number one is the risk of positional asphyxiation because of the anatomy and physiology of younger infants, the relative weakness of the neck, the relatively large head size, and the degree to which incline allows the head to flop forward or turn to the side in an unnatural way. One of the other things we have seen with inclined sleepers specifically is the risk with enabling infants to turn over at a point when, prior to when most babies will be able to turn over. That was part of what the research of Dr. Mannon from University of Arkansas showed. And a number of the deaths associated with sleepers were infants who were younger than 4 months old who were found face down in the sleeper.
Right, but this is the point I'm trying to clarify from a physician's point of view. The 10% that's the incline itself, though, does not create the rollover risk, correct? It's not the incline that causes.
The incline itself does lead to that rollover risk, especially with the construction of those sleepers. Yes. Okay, that was the point I was trying to get your position on. I was unclear on that. It sounded like apples. No. It's thank you. That's very helpful, and that's all I have. So if any other commissioners want to take my few seconds left, I'm happy to give it up.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Feldman. Questions?
Thank you, Acting Chairman Adler. And first of all, I just want to echo Commissioner Biacco's sentiments early on about what a great job staff did in putting this all together. I know that this isn't easy, and I realize that these are challenging times for everybody, but this is going forward in a way that's far exceeding, I think, any of our expectations. So thank you. Dr. Hoffman, I want to thank you and frankly the rest of the panelists for being here. But Dr. Hoffman, I wanted to talk a little bit about the work that AAP's done for its attention to the issue of pediatric nicotine poisoning, and thank you for raising that in your remarks. As you know, CPSC's enforcement of the Child Nicotine Poisoning Prevention Act has been spotty at best, and it took the agency a little bit to get it right. I worked on drafting the legislation when I was a staffer in the Senate, and I've made it a priority in my short tenure at the agency so far. That's not to say that there isn't a lot more work to be done, but without AAP's advocacy, I'm not sure that any of this would have been possible. I was hoping that you could talk a little bit more about why CPSC should prioritize CNPPA enforcement, and a little bit more, because metrics are important here. What do you think would demonstrate meaningful progress on implementation beyond the actions that the agency's already taken?
Thank you for that question, Commissioner Feldman, and thank you for all of your work around the Child Nicotine Poisoning Prevention Act. We know that calls to poison centers from liquid nicotine products increased from about 3,000 to over 5,000 between 2018 and 2019, which is about an increase of 66%. I think again, shining a light on the problem is important. I think the fact that liquid nicotine is available in so many different modalities and from so many different outlets, whether it's packaged in products like Juul, or whether it's sold in a dropper at a corner bodega, changes the risk significantly. I think the presence of mandatory child-resistant packaging standards would be crucial, and especially the use of flow restrictors. Some of the liquid nicotine products are so concentrated that even dripping them onto a child's skin can cause enough absorption to achieve a toxic level. I think that unless we move and and actually implement something, things are going to get worse long before they get better.
No, I appreciate that, and thank you for expanding a little bit. Listen, none of this would have been possible without your and AAC's efforts in this regard. So again, I thank you. I have no further questions, and I'll yield the balance of my time.
Thank you very much for that. And because some of the panelists did not get a chance to respond either to Commissioner Kaye's questions or some other issues, I think we can take 2 minutes for any member of the panel who feels that they need to add some additional comments to do so. And so in particular, Mr. Wallace, we have not had a chance to hear any comments from you. Had anything you would like to add to any of the discussion so far? I appreciate it now.
Thank you very much. I would say in response to Commissioner Kaye's question, I would echo my colleagues who said that the CPSC needs additional funding and staffing. That's critical. I would say also that an area of focus needs to be to sort of break the cycle that we're in. We need to substantially strengthen product safety reporting and recall requirements and remedies. Right now, the fact that the CPSC can warn the public, but then it ends up essentially needing to, negotiate over a voluntary recall. It allows for very little teeth. Currently the law doesn't include minimum requirements for companies to disclose or agree to for voluntary recalls. And so the recalls vary widely in their language and in their remedies, and it greatly affects their effectiveness. So
1 minute remaining.
We are we're pushing for far stronger requirements and also for stronger guidance on what the CPSC's expectations are for companies when it comes to recalls. And then I'll touch on, I know we all are you're well aware of all of our positions on Section 6B and the impact that it has on the agency. So I'll just touch briefly also on the agency's rulemaking authority. It's important in our view for the agency to have APA rulemaking. Right now, Section 7 and 9 create a gauntlet for the agency, and it makes it very difficult for the agency to either finalize rules with important safety requirements in them, or simply have the credible, ability to do so without APA rulemaking authority. And that affects voluntary standard setting as well. That makes it much more unlikely that that industries will take action on their own or in a consensus-based process.
So thank you very much for those comments. We thank all of the panelists for their testimony. It's actually been very, very helpful to us, and we look forward to any additional comments you wish to submit or any additional questions that the commissioners wish to share. We will move to the second panel, but before we move to the second panel, I'm going to give everyone a 2-minute break before we recommence. We will recommence with the panel 2, which would be Ms. Linda Kaiser, Parents for Window Blind Safety, Mr. Remington Gregg from Public Citizen, Ms. Karen Athanas, I hope I pronounced that right, from TIC Council of Americas, Mr. Graham Owens from the National Association of Manufacturers, and Ms. Kristen Kern from American Apparel and Footwear Association. So a minute And we're back. And I hope our panelists are prepared to proceed. So first, we will turn to Ms. Linda Kaiser, Parents for Window Blind Safety. Ms. Kaiser, are you there? Ms. Kaiser, are you there? Linda Kaiser. I'll tell you what, let's move to Mr. Remington Gregg from Public Citizen. Are you there? Steve McGugan, is there an issue with getting these folks online? Let me see if anybody from the panel is there. Ms. Karen Thanis, are you there?
Yay. I'm here. It's Linda Kaiser. I was
Hello.
just being muted.
Oh, okay, wonderful. Okay, we
Yay.
thought we'd lost you. All right, Ms. Kaiser, please proceed.
Thank you. Let me just get a drink here. Sorry. I'm just waiting for my slides to load. So once I see those, I'll begin. There we go. Okay. Since the death of my daughter, Cheyenne Rose, and founding of our organization 18 years ago, our mission is educating consumers about hazardous cords on window coverings. Next slide, please. Cords are hazardous, period. So this is Carol Eastburn and her daughter Presley. She was 4 years old when she was strangled by a custom corded window covering. Carol was with me at ICVSO. Many of you met her if you were there at ICVSO. The other child here is Kaya. She was strangled this past December on a custom window covering. She will never walk, talk, or play again. Both of these window coverings were installed by professionals and both had safety devices that failed. And I'm showing these to you because custom window coverings that are corded are not safe. And if they have safety devices on them, safety devices are known to fail. Next slide, please. So the current window covering standard leaves numerous custom risks unaddressed, including long, accessible operating cords on custom products that are always reachable, especially by older children such as these. All of these children passed away. Next slide, please. Custom hazards include long, accessible, retractable cords and looped cords. They also include an unlimited amount of cords used on products. This was a product installed by a professional. Next product, please. Next slide. Operating cords that have loops are also included in the standard. Next slide, please. Operating cords that form hazardous loops by way of cord connectors when 2 or more cords are joined together. Next slide, please. Inner cords on bamboo roll-up shades and faulty tension device or tie-down devices that can be pulled out of walls are also not addressed on the custom side of the standard. This is just one example of an IDI report of dozens and dozens of faulty safety devices that failed parents over the decades. So knowing that all of these hazards still exist on custom products in the United States, I'm humbly asking that the CPSC prioritize window covering safety. We are not done. The CPSC made a commitment to continue to work on the ANPR if the window covering manufacturers did not fulfill their obligations to eliminate the hazards associating with window covering cords. To date, the hazard still exists. So where's the commitment to the future children and to the advocates? So my daughter, Cheyenne, would be 19 years old today. I have been writing the CPSC for 18 years. Over 300 children have died and hundreds have been seriously injured since her death. So to be clear, next slide. We are asking the CPSC to prioritize window coverings by moving the petition we filed in 2012 forward due to the reneging commitment of the WCMA. They were supposed to open the standard in June 2019. It's now almost June 2020. That hasn't happened. Budget funds and staff time, next slide please, for window covering mandatory standard to be finalized. Next slide please. Adequately inform the public about hazards posed to window coverings. And let me explain this a little bit. Next slide please. We recommend CPSC update their messaging by stating, keeping cords out of sight. All children can access cords
1 minute
out of
remaining.
reach. Since there is clear data proving that all cords are reachable. You can find that in several IDIs, hundreds of IDIs of children grabbing cords that are in cord cleats, that are tied out of reach. So we think it's important to state to keep cords out of sight, not out of reach. Stating cords on custom products are hazardous instead of ignoring that fact. Stating that cords are hazardous to children ages 7 and under instead of saying young children. Consumers don't understand that what young children means. They want to know the age specific ranges. Urging the public to go cordless regardless of whether they have children. Next slide, please. Consumers become parents every day and they really don't have any clue that cords are hazardous. I know that sounds crazy, but they really don't. It's vital that the message is clear and not diluted. It is vital that CPSC makes window covering safety a top priority, especially during these times. And so I just thank you guys so much for everything that you do, and thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kaiser. Remington, Greg, Mr. Greg, are you out there?
Yes, I am here. Thank you.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Acting Chairman Adler and Commissioners. Public Citizen appreciates the opportunity to testify at today's priority hearing. Public Citizen is eager to see the CPSC increase transparency through less reliance on Section 6B, increase the use of technology to advance the agency's mission, swiftly finalize rulemaking on important issues that have languished at the agency, and advocate strongly for more funding for the agency. Section 6B frustratingly ties the hands of the CPSC, which has real-world tragic consequences. If the agency seeks to name names under existing law, it can be pulled into protracted litigation, which could further delay the release of safety information to parents. But generic descriptions are not enough for a consumer to know that a specific product may be in their home. And as of March 2020, quote-unquote infant inclined sleep products have been linked to, unfortunately, 73 deaths. 6B not only muzzles the CPSC from releasing specific safety information, it prevents journalists, consumer advocates, and government watchdogs from obtaining information about the agency's unfortunately all too frequent failures to get dangerous products out of our homes. Earlier this year, Representative Bobby Rush introduced the Share Information Act. This legislation would repeal the problematic provisions of 6B. While we work with Congress to repeal or at the very least reform 6B, the Commission can play a role in increasing transparency into how companies invoke 6B in order to prevent the release of critical health and safety information. We urge the Commission to better track the use of this provision through yearly detailed reports on the number of times 6B has been invoked by a company, and if that prevented the agency from releasing information, how many times 6B litigation has occurred, and whether the same companies repeatedly invoke 6B to avoid information disclosures. We are pleased that Congress required the Commission to create saferproducts.gov database, and it has been a useful tool for consumers. Public Citizen has continuously urged the Commission to collaborate with technologists and innovators, including those who have experience in the public-private sector, to implement the recommendations that we have made to the Commission that include a non-exhaustive list of ideas we believe would make saferproducts.gov more effective. In addition to implementing these recommendations, creating a more effective database requires expertise that we do not believe is currently housed at the Commission. And that's why we applaud Senator Jerry Moran for introducing the CPSC CIO Parity Act, which would require the agency to hire chief technologists who would help address this issue, among others, such as improving recall effective rates, as well as transforming the Commission to a nimbler agency for a complex society. And while we believe that most federal agencies should suspend rulemaking unrelated to the COVID-19 crisis for the duration of the national emergency declaration, we believe that the below rules, finalizing rulemaking that protect consumers and infants, and which have had unanimous support of the entire commission, should be finalized with all deliberate speed to protect the safety of our nation's infants. First, incline sleep product rule, which many consumer advocates have already spoken about and will speak about. Second, the proposed rule for gates and enclosures that was primarily developed by ASTM International with input from consumer advocates, industry, and the public. This non-controversial rule should be immediately finalized. And third, crib bumpers. In March 2020, the Commission unanimously agreed to advance rulemaking for a final crib bumper safety standard. Public Citizen urges the Commission to quickly finalize this rule. The CPSC has jurisdiction over more than 15,000 consumer products. Its staggeringly low budget at less than $130 million makes it difficult for the agency's dedicated staff to carry out its mission. We believe that every commissioner has an obligation to strongly advocate for more funding. Without more substantial funding, the agency will continue to struggle to meet all the demands that statutory requirements and the public place on it. The Commission faces
1 minute remaining.
Challenges that we know the agency staff work tirelessly to carry out its mission to protect the public from unreasonable injury or death. However, the Commission must do more, including promulgating robust rules and standards to protect consumers, proactively working to get ahead of product safety hazards, and engaging with consumer advocates early and often on issues that they are seeing are problematic. Most importantly, we urge every commissioner, current and those who may join the Commission in the future, to put science, consumer safety, and common sense safeguards before politics and unbending ideology. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments, and we look forward to continuing to work together to improve consumer safety.
And thank you very much for your testimony, Mr. Gregg. I turn now, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Ms. Karen Athanas from TIC Council of Americas.
Yes, thank you so much. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Well, good morning, Acting Chair Adler and the commissioners. Very much appreciate the opportunity to speak today regarding the Commission's agenda and priorities for fiscal year 2021 and 2022. TIC Council is the global trade federation representing the independent third-party testing, inspection, and certification TIC industry, which brings together more than 90 member companies and organizations from around the world to speak with one voice. Consumer safety is of high importance to TIC organizations, and it is on this topic I would like to speak today. TIC Council Americas, the Americas branch of the TIC Council, and its member organizations have long enjoyed working with the Commission, and we look forward to another year of engagement and open communication. TIC Council and its members welcome CPSC's outreach to stakeholders, especially those of us in conformity assessment, to have open conversations about the best path forward for ensuring consumer safety. We feel this is essential to the regulatory process and recommend the continued close collaboration of the CPSC with independent testing, inspection, and certification industry organizations such as TIC Council. Approaches that the TIC Council recommends the Commission take to continue to engage the industry include partnership with TIC Council in a coordinated effort including industry, consumers, and other stakeholders to address the growing issues of counterfeit products sold through e-commerce platforms. A 2019 report by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development identified growth of 154% from 2005 to 2016 in the trade of fake goods. Of those found to be counterfeit, many are also identified as low quality and able to cause injury to consumers. This issue has only grown in recent months during the COVID-19 crisis, where consumers are finding themselves purchasing products online more often than in brick and mortar stores, and these products are being shipped directly to consumers. In some cases, the product is shipped as a single item and may not be identified by customs as a potentially counterfeit product. To address this growing issue, a partnership of industry, consumers, TIC, and regulators is needed to find solutions and to educate end users on how they can protect themselves from injury. 2, TIC Council also recommends the CPSC consider partnering with TIC Council and its members to leverage their technical expertise and global footprint in CPSC's training of manufacturers and designers. Product safety requirements and best practices across the globe can be diverse, and during this challenging time, travel to remote locations can be difficult. TIC Council members have a long history of assisting industry in traversing such requirements by offering training and advising manufacturers and designers, and better preparing them to meet the requirements of the CPSC and others. TIC's experience engaging with industry through virtual and remote means ensures that education and training can continue with limited disruption from the COVID-19 pandemic. Manufacturing and designer training is critically important as it can help ensure the safety is being built into the earliest stages of the supply chain, and it is a preventative and cost-effective approach to consumer safety. 3, TIC Council recommends that the CPSC engage with stakeholders to discuss common sense policies to address safety hazards caused by IoT devices. In our report entitled Status Report on the Internet of Things and Consumer Product Safety by the CPSC Office of Hazard Identification and Reduction, it states the CPSC staff is working to gain an understanding of the best way to define consumer product safety in terms of IoT, the intersection of and interdependencies among consumer product safety, data security, and privacy, and how our traditional risk management approaches apply to these products. Just recently, TIC Council engaged in an informative panel at the February 2020 ICPHSO conference on the same topic, identifying potential risks, areas of risk that originate from IoT functionality of consumer devices. And we thank CPSC staff for participating on that panel discussion. TIC Council continues to support CPSC's efforts to better understand this emerging industry.
1 minute remaining.
And the risks to safety associated with IoT functionality. 4, to support the evaluation of emerging industries, TIC Council recommends that the CPSC organize stakeholder roundtables virtually and in person, and that through engagement with stakeholders at the CPSC seek alignment on the best path forward for new industries which may create a risk to safety, including 3D printing and wearable devices. Wearables come in many forms, and innovation in all industry sectors have created a growing industry of consumer products. Where IoT and cybersecurity play an interconnected role, the safety of these devices remains paramount. And better understanding the function of application and the intrinsic safety risks that they pose will better prepare all stakeholders in ensuring that consumers are protected. 3D printing has become commonplace in classrooms and many homes with the advent of smaller and even handheld devices. These devices come with risks of fire, burns, mechanical injury, and others, and further discussion of their use and the safety risks they pose will better prepare the industry.
Time.
And finally, TIC Council recommends that the CPSC leverage private sector conformity assessment when designing conformity assessment programs to fulfill policy needs. Thank you again for allowing me to speak today on behalf of TIC Council and our membership. We continue to serve the Commission through our work in evaluating products in accordance with published policy and regulation, and remain ready to engage, educate, and have open conversations with CPSC and other stakeholders.
And we thank you very much for that testimony. Turn now to Mr. Graham Owens, Association of Manufacturers.
Chairman,
Mr. Owens.
I'm here. Hear me?
Yes.
Great. Acting Chairman Adler and Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to testify at today's priorities hearing. My name is Graham Owens. I'm the Director of Regulatory Policy at the National Association of Manufacturers, the nation's largest industrial trade association and the voice for millions of men and women who make things in America. Manufacturers are committed to providing safe products and ensuring a well-functioning and credible product safety regime that provides confidence that products meet all applicable safety standards and regulations. The NAM has long been a leader in the effort to improve the Consumer Product Safety Act and the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act to ensure the laws work for consumers, manufacturers, and importers. Manufacturers believe regulations based on science and objective risk assessments are critical to the protection of worker and consumer safety, the public health, and our environment. Manufacturers applaud the Commission's ongoing leadership in improving the safety of consumer products and addressing the growing problem of unsafe counterfeits. However, as I will discuss, we also believe there are certain action items that, if included in the Commission's upcoming agenda, will foster the collaborative and communicative relationship between industry and the Commission necessary to protect consumers while empowering manufacturers to continue leading efforts to secure the health, safety, and prosperity of Americans. There are 3 key issues the CPSC should prioritize in the coming years. First, the CPSC should address the disproportionate regulatory burden borne by manufacturers, which falls heavily on small businesses, to help support manufacturers currently working to address COVID-19 and to support manufacturers' vital role in the economic recovery and renewal. Manufacturers are playing a key role in the effort to combat COVID-19, which reflects the industry's commitment to product safety. Manufacturers are making the products essential to supporting America during the crisis, and a strong economic recovery will simply not be possible without a robust manufacturing sector. Many of these consumer product manufacturers have switched production to make essential items such as personal protective equipment, and in doing so are working with new regulators. Some have completely redesigned their shop floors to do so. Our unique perspective informs the NAM's American Renewal Action Plan to help policymakers chart a path forward through the response, recovery, and renewal phases of this crisis. It is included as an appendix to my written statement. Given the CPSC's vast jurisdiction and critical mission, it is well positioned to be a leader in identifying ways to ensure the U.S. regulatory regime is the most effective and efficient in the world. Taking simple steps such as those detailed in my written statement, and in particular, identifying ways the agency can provide enforcement and compliance flexibility for manufacturers, and especially those that have shifted production to produce essential items like PPE, will go a long way to ensuring regulatory red tape does not impede manufacturers' efforts to address the crisis and lead a robust economic recovery. The importance of the Commission and the need for this regulatory flexibility at this time is further underscored by the inclusion of independent agencies in the recently issued executive order on the need for regulatory reform. The manufacturers applaud the Commission's recent recognitions of its role in effectuating the order's objectives. Second, the Commission should prioritize addressing the growing threat of dangerous counterfeit products, as previous panelists noted. As families are staying home, they're going online to purchase toys to keep children entertained, desks and chairs to set up home offices, outdoor power equipment to tend to their homes, and recreational equipment to stay in shape. Manufacturers of all these products have reported alarming levels of counterfeits with serious harm to consumers from the failures of these products. The anecdotal evidence includes springs shooting out of counterfeit standing desks and injuries from counterfeit chainsaws. In working to further address counterfeits, the CPSC should specifically consider adopting the proposals detailed in the NAM's written statement, and where necessary, work with Congress to effectuate these reforms. Third, the CPSC should prioritize fostering a system that encourages industry and the Commission to work as partners. A collaborative relationship is exactly what Congress intended, as evidenced by multiple sections of the CPSA and CPSIA. Protection 6B is perhaps the most important role the agency can play in fostering an open and productive relationship with manufacturers. The protections of 6B perform a critically important balancing function with the congressionally mandated reporting requirements of Section 15, encouraging companies to voluntarily over-report potential product concerns and work cooperatively with the CPSC, even when reporting might not be required by law.
1 minute remaining.
Section 6B protections would act as a disincentive to speedy voluntary disclosure, creating a bias toward working with legal counsel before alerting the Commission. This would deprive the agency of access to critically important information that, while perhaps not required to be reported, could help inform the agency of dangerous counterfeit products. Similarly, the CPSC should also prioritize ensuring stakeholders are provided fair notice and due process, especially with regard to the issuance of unilateral press releases. The CPSC's mission of protecting the public from unreasonable risk and injury would be better served if the CPS works with manufacturers to ensure that all information released to the public is accurate prior to the release. Lastly, the CPSC should prioritize making the fast track program fast again. The recent slowdown of the program is just not good for consumers, the Commission, or manufacturers. In closing, I urge the Commission to review the NAM's written submission for specific regulations that manufacturers believe should be addressed. Thank you, Acting Chairman Adler and Commissioners, for your time today. Manufacturers stand ready to work with the CPSC to ensure that the agency discharges its critical mission in a responsible, collaborative, and effective manner. I look forward to answering your questions.
And we thank you for your testimony. Ms. Kristen Kern from the American Apparel and Footwear Association.
Good morning, and thank you, Commissioners, for the opportunity to testify. I'm Kristen Kern with the American Apparel and Footwear Association. AAFA is the national trade association representing apparel, footwear, and other sewn products companies and their suppliers, which compete in the global market. We represent more than 1,000 world-famous name brands, and we are the trusted public policy and political voice of the apparel and footwear industry, its management and shareholders, its nearly 4 million U.S. workers, and its contribution of more than $400 billion in annual U.S. retail sales. We are proud of the open and collaborative relationship that we share with the Commission. With many of our members engaged in the production and sale of children's clothing and footwear, we are on the front lines of product safety. It is our members who design and execute the quality and compliance programs that stitch product safety into every garment and shoe we make. To support our members in this effort, AAFA has taken the lead in educating our industry on the development, interpretation, and implementation of product safety standards and regulations. As such, in this time of uncertainty around a global pandemic, we are working with our industry to adjust to change, whether that's the change that results from shutdowns in the supply chain, supporting employees in uncertain times, or transitioning their supply chains to make masks and gowns for hospitals who are rationing supplies. We also continue to work on day-to-day issues that will ease the industry's work devoted to addressing the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. The priorities that we hope the Commission will adopt are as follows. Addressing counterfeits as a safety issue. In response to conversations with CPSC commissioners about potential product safety concerns created by counterfeit products, AAFA is working with our membership to gather information on this priority issue, such as how companies address counterfeits from a safety perspective, which specific hazards are common in counterfeit goods, and how the CPSC can collaborate on the issue. We hope that the CPSC will prioritize taking a leading role in stopping counterfeit products from entering the US, working with the CBP to develop stronger systems to detect counterfeits, and urging third-party marketplaces to have rigorous anti-counterfeit programs in place. Allowing garment labels to use digital information. We urge the CPSC to allow companies to use new technology to deliver required product safety information, such as tracking labels required in children's products, to consumers. Complicated international apparel labeling regulations have resulted in pages-long, uncomfortable labels in garments, and consumers often report to our brands that the labels are itchy and irritating as a result of all the information that's required to be displayed permanently attached to the garment. The labels sewn into a garment can often go beyond discomfort to cause a product safety hazard, such as chafing and skin irritation, especially for children. Companies who make children's clothing, athletic apparel, undergarments, other tight-fitting performance apparel have been leading the industry in this technology to print labeling either directly inside a garment to avoid an irritating label, but only a limited amount of information can be printed directly on a garment. So those same companies are now leading this effort to digitize labeling information. The other side of an irritating garment label is that consumers often resort to removing the label from their garment, separating the information required on the garment from the product itself. A missing label makes it difficult or impossible for a consumer to identify the product's manufacturer and identifying production information when necessary in the case of a recall. Since there is now technology to move product information that is currently present on physical labels to the internet, we would like to see the rules updated to permit easily accessible information to reside online to satisfy labeling requirements. The result would be consumers having access to important garment information over the life of the garment without having to sacrifice the comfort of the garment. The benefit also extends to solve issues with used and secondhand products being separated from labeling information, as a small label with only a QR code or URL printed directly on the label would be less likely to be removed by the consumer. Additionally, this technology allows companies to update the information in a label to include compliance with new labeling regulations, recall and safety information, and other necessary data. In conclusion, we're delighted to have a positive relationship with the Commission, and we believe that there are many opportunities for further collaboration. Thank you.
And we thank you so much for your comments, and we thank all the panelists. We will now begin a round of 5 minutes of questioning of the panelists. Ms. Kaiser, I have more of a comment and one quick question. I just want to thank you and the other parents who are testifying today for the courage that you've demonstrated in coming to testify and the persistence in sticking with it. But even more so, what's been driving you, aside from the tragedies in your family, is an immersion in the technical aspects of the work that we're doing. And I have to tell you how much I admire the fact that you have really dug deep into product safety regulation and how it should proceed. So I thank you for that. In your written testimony, Ms. Kaiser, you mentioned Health Canada's window blind standard, and I was wondering if you have had a chance to look at it and if you see any features of it that you like or that you would commend to the Commission, and if you could explain why you think that is presenting such problems in getting the voluntary standard for custom window blinds promulgated.
I really like the Health Canada standard, and the reason why is because I think it would be very easy to regulate. I think it'd be very easy to have compliance because, you know, it's easy. There's not a lot of performance requirements. Anyone can look at a window covering and measure a cord by the way they have it and say, oh, you know, it's 12 inches and there's no question for that. So I think compliance would be a lot easier. And in comparison to the US standard, which it's just so difficult looking at all the different performance requirements to this standard. It's just so intertwined, you know, it's 68 or more pages of different things, and even labs looking at this current standard, they don't even know what to do with it. So both standards, I lean towards the Canadian ones because it's so simple and easy. I know the manufacturers don't like the Canadian standard because it does limit some of their product lines. But to be honest, when you look at, children and all of the children that have died because of those products, there's a lot of products that have to be limited because of those health reasons. So that's just, my opinion. If products are killing kids in their bedrooms, I think that, it's not, I think those products should be eliminated from the market.
And thank you for that. And my next question is first to Mr. Gregg and then to Mr. Owens, and it has to do with Section 6B, which is a topic of great debate and discussion at the agency and has been for many years. So my question is, this is a section that's supposed to ensure that the agency takes reasonable steps to ensure that only fair and accurate information is released, which is commendable. In fact, we're the only agency with these kinds of formal official restrictions on our ability to share information with the public. So I guess my question is there a reason why the CPSC ought to be singled out, and do other agencies lacking 6B procedures and requirements, do they engage more often in information abuse than CPSC? So Mr. Gregg, let me first ask you, and then Mr. Owen.
To my knowledge, I've not witnessed or heard of other agencies that have engaged in untoward practices because they have the information. If you look at the FDA, for example, which has important responsibilities, they do not have such a requirement. NHTSA, for example, does not have the type of requirement. One thing I would add is that, I think that industry does talk about how they're sharing information. I mean, number one, obviously, all
1 minute remaining
has to comply with the law. So this isn't about doing anything but complying with the law. If you talk about oversharing information, right now the information is never getting to the public. And so what is the use of the good of having information when consumers never receive the information that can help them?
Mr. Owens, did you have a quick comment about Section 6B?
Thanks, Chair. First, I would push back on or disagree with the referring to it as a restriction. I think there's no restriction as evidenced by the Commission and your ability to release information unilaterally. And why it's unique is because Section 15 is unique. And the recognition that an inaccurate release of information, even if clawed back through court, can ultimately kill a company or even that product, all simply because the information that went out was not verified prior. So, we see it as a protection to make sure we do everything we need as quickly as possible without having to counsel each time. Thank you.
Again, we thank the panelists for their input, and I now turn to Commissioner Kaye for any questions or comments he wishes to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you as well to the second group of panelists for making this work. We really value your input. I wanted to start with Mr. Owens and Ms. Kern on the issue of counterfeits, please. If you have not had a chance to read a report that our staff put up earlier this year on de minimis shipments and the struggles that we have at import, I recommend it because one of the key takeaways from that report was that in 3 years, if nothing changes in terms of our targeting ability, about 55% by volume of the shipments that come in under our jurisdiction, we will be blind to their contents because of the de minimis issues and them coming in through common carriers. And obviously there's a nexus there between our not able to spot those shipments or identify what's in them and counterfeits. And so my first question to the two of you on counterfeits is there anything that you're aware of that CBP is doing, and CBP obviously also struggles with counterfeits, but anything CBP is doing or even industry is doing that we could benefit from so that we are better able to identify counterfeits both through traditional methods of entry as well as the growing issue of de minimis shipments?
This is Graham with NAM. I begin, and I thank you for the question, Commissioner. So yes, absolutely familiar with the report and with the de minimis issue as it relates to counterfeit. And I think you're right. It's absolutely something that needs to be addressed. And the NAM has been a leader not only in postal reform back in September of 2019, but over the last year or so, we've really heard the call and made prioritizing counterfeit top of mind. And through that, we've worked with the Congress, worked with the White House, and are building together and are planning to release a white paper soon that addresses that specific issue and many other proposals that we think this commission and other agencies, including CBP, can do to collectively address counterfeits, because it can't be done by one agency. It really will require all stakeholders, brand owners, the government, policymakers, and consumers as well to work together to address the real problem, which is counterfeiters, and to a lesser extent, but still important, e-commerce's role in it.
Great. We look forward to that. Please make sure, if you could, that you direct our attention to it when it's released.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Ms. Kern, anything from your end on counterfeits and what we can do, particularly with de minimis?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner, for that comment. First, I'll of course second Graham's comments. Our primary work on this issue has been focusing on accountability in third-party marketplaces. And so, of course, the CPSC joining voices there with holding third-party sellers accountable for the products they sell. They're notoriously difficult to track down and hold accountable to ensure that the products they sell are safe and properly verified for testing of safety components. If they're a counterfeit product, there's no reason for bad actors to test their counterfeit products for safety criteria. And we've seen that recently with some issues in children's counterfeit children's products that have ended up harming consumers. So appreciate your interest in the issue, and just urge you to, as you are able to, be part of that work.
Great, thank you for that. I really appreciate it. And with my last minute and 7 seconds, I want to turn to Ms. Kaiser. If you were on during the first panel, I asked a question about what can we do to change the dynamic about the fact that, unfortunately, folks have to keep coming back and testifying on the same issues over and over again, and nothing seems to change. And there's really probably no better example of that than your advocacy for 18 years on window coverings and the fact that we're still not done. And so I agree with you, first of all, that we should move ahead with rulemaking. I would be happy to vote tomorrow on getting the staff to send up a rulemaking package of the next phase and notice of proposed rulemaking. And I would encourage the commission to do that. I think it's certainly time and we should be covering all the products. But I also wonder what your experience has been since the voluntary standard was amended. Do you see major changes in the compliance of stock products that are currently on the market with the new standard?
I do see compliance with that, but I don't know how relevant that is, because I think the question we should ask is, what is the percentage of the custom on the marketplace now based on what it was then when this current standard was released? So basically the percentage was 20% when they claimed that stock was 80%. So if custom is now 50%, which is what we're kind of seeing, we're seeing an increase of custom products on the market. And so if that's the case, then the risk has actually increased. And so it doesn't matter if they're compliant in the stock. Well, it does matter, but what matters is how many cords are on the market now. And if custom has increased, then we have a problem. That means that the standard didn't work because the custom products on the market have increased, especially the faux corded blinds that are custom.
Thank you very much.
I totally agree. We need to address custom as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Cade. Thank you, Ms. Kaiser. Commissioner Biacco? Commissioner Biacco, any questions or comments?
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me, Bob? Oh,
yes.
I was sorry, I was muted. Thank you. I am really happy to hear the support for actions to be taken on the counterfeits. I think that whether you call it counterfeit or fake, or more importantly, non-compliant with safety rules, I think this is one of the greatest safety consumer product safety issues facing the entire country, no matter what your walk of life, no matter what your age group is, no matter what your interest is, because these products are flying in directly to a consumer's house and bypassing all of the good work that this agency and our stakeholders are doing and have done. And right before this pandemic, if I haven't been public enough about this, I want everyone to know, and I'll do better. This has been a big initiative of mine since I got here to the CPSC. And right before the pandemic, I was meeting with people from the Commerce Department, different agencies, IPR, and working on exactly the issue that Commissioner Kay raises, and that is the de minimis shipping coming in. Now, I can tell you that our import surveillance team, which was created by statute, the statute limits us. And so our ability to go beyond our interaction with CBP is limited, unfortunately, by statute. The good news is CBP and the CPSC have a fabulous relationship, and CBP is doing a great job on this issue. But I want to answer Commissioner Kay's question, actually, that he asked about what we could do more with CBP. There is a pilot program currently going on between CBP, and I think there were nine entities, including Amazon, I think Walmart. One of the requirements to be part of that pilot program to track de minimis shipments of non-compliant goods had to do with a particular type of technology. In other words, CBP and all of the participants in this pilot program have the same technology. Now, I ask you, why does not CPSC have the same technology? We need to get in the game. We need to be able to run artificial intelligence. We need to be able to run natural language processing. We need to be able to anticipate where this stuff is coming from, and there are ways to do it. We need to upgrade our systems to be able to participate in the technology world in which we live, and we're all buying online. And I couldn't agree more that during this pandemic, I mean, there has been more more crap coming into my own house. And I'm reading about this every day. You can see when you look at some, whether it has lead paint in a child's toy, whether it is just fake, whether it is advertised as one thing and then you get something else. This is something that I think if the CPSC engages in full-heartedly, we can protect the good work that we've done, and we can work with all stakeholders to protect not only interests of the consumer, but the interests of particularly our small businesses. But do keep in mind that the CPSC's jurisdiction is limited to consumer product safety rules. We can't be getting into, we're not here to protect IP or anything else like that. So I do agree with some of the comments regarding working with other agencies. So let's talk about this more. This is definitely a priority we should be engaged in, particularly future, and we should not allow these e-commerce platforms to have no accountability for the same things that brick and mortar stores do have accountability for. How's that for pontification?
Are you looking for responses or observations?
That's really just, if anybody wants to respond to that. Otherwise, I don't have any questions.
1 minute remaining.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Commissioner Biacco, for those comments. And I've always hated minutes because it makes it feel like it's not important. I just like e-commerce because that's really what's going on. But I thank you for those comments. And I do invite any of the panelists, if they wanted to respond to Commissioner Biacco's comments, to respond.
Yeah, this is Karen Athanas from Tick Council Americas. In addition to the comments already made on counterfeiting, I think it's important to stress that communication on both sides is very important to ensure that industry can notify CPSC and customs of potential issues we've identified, and vice versa. I think with that information, as Commissioner Biacco has pointed out, we can use technology to identify trends. Which companies seem to be importing counterfeit products the most? What packaging are they using? What shipping method are they using? And we can use that data to better identify counterfeits.
Okay, we thank you for that. Thank you. And now Commissioner Feldman, if you have questions or comments.
Thank you, Acting Chairman Adler. And again, just want to say thank you to all the panelists for being here today under the circumstances. Ms. Kern and Mr. Owen, I want to thank you both in particular for being here and for the nimble work that many of your members have done over the past recent months in converting production lines to meet rapidly changing consumer demand, including the production of PPE. Without your members, I don't think the country would be in the spot that we're in right now. So that's a good thing. Graham, I'm glad that you brought up in your comments the president's recent executive order on regulatory relief to support the economic recovery. This virus has attacked our nation's economy as well as our health. And as the nation's leading regulator on consumer products and with jurisdiction over thousands of consumer products and touching any number of economic sectors up and down the supply chain, CPSC clearly will have a role to play and has a role to play in the economic recovery. As you know, the EO does apply to independent agencies, so CPSC certainly falls within the scope of its ambit. So we need to take a look at promoting the economic recovery, identifying regulatory standards that might inhibit the economic recovery, and among other things, providing fairness in our administrative enforcement and adjudication. I wanted to ask and get your thoughts on how we're doing and what more we can do in terms of compliance.
Thank you, Commissioner Feldman, and thank you for the question. So, yeah, I mean, it's a difficult question always to find these things, but I think the CPSC could certainly be doing more. It's a unique relationship with manufacturers and manufacturers, particularly as they're switching production to PP and working with the FDA and CDC for the first time instead of the traditional regulator that they know, the CPSC. And the reality is that the vast majority of manufacturers, I believe in 2017, of the 248,039 firms in manufacturing, all but 3,900 were small, with less than 500, and 3/4 of these firms had less than 20 employees. If you think about that in terms of compliance and managing regulations and their requirements, that's a lot to do to suddenly be dealing with 3-4 agencies. It's not the first time. So first and foremost, being clear about opportunities for flexibility, making it clear to manufacturers that coming to the agency to ask for extensions where allowed under the law. And of course, as the executive order says, this all must fall within the parameters Congress set for the agency. But within those parameters, where are opportunities for flexibility, reporting? This is where that collaborative relationship I highlighted in my testimony really comes into play. The more collaborative and more of a partnership the relationship is, the better this type of process works. So, I first and foremost just encourage the agency to make clear their willingness to support agency, which helps by the public announcement that you'll be complying with the executive order. If you can identify specific ways by working with manufacturers, I stand ready to work with the commission. I know our members stand ready to identify specifics. And then I also, again, want to point you to our American Action Renewal Plan and the recent follow-up document on broadening the supply chain in the United States as part of our renewal. There are lots of specific opportunities there that I think the agency can play a big role in.
I appreciate that, but I think simply stating that CPSC intends to comply with the EO, doesn't necessarily go as far as we might in terms of documenting with clarity exactly what kind of
1 minute remaining
available. Am I hearing you correctly that you stand ready to work to identify sort of specific ways that we might memorialize that kind of flexibility and working with us to identify standards that might inhibit economic recovery that are worthy of scrutiny and attention by the agency?
Yes, Commissioner Feldman. And like I said, there's in my written statement there are a few. I mean, compliance assistance, particularly for the small manufacturers I mentioned, would be helpful and better serve the public's interest. Reviewing and engaging in periodic review of regulations and withdrawing and addressing some of the regulations I also noted in my written statement, many that have sat on the docket for years. that lack of clarity and sort of murkiness just isn't helping anyone. And again, as particularly these small manufacturers of less than 20 people are trying to navigate 3, 4, 5 regulatory agencies suddenly, all because they want to supply their regional hospitals with the materials that they need. So, you know, we absolutely find and appreciate your question.
I agree. It sounds like this is an ongoing conversation. I appreciate your willingness to continue working with us, and it sounds like my time's expired. Thank you.
And thank you, Commissioner Feldman, and thank you to the panelists. We've reached a point now where we're going to take a break. Most of us are not going to run out to restaurants to have lunch, and you would think that that might lead to a shorter break, but I'm told there are technical issues that require us to take a full 1 hour for our lunch break. So we will reconvene, as I look at it, I'm going to say at 12:40. We will reconvene at 12:40. In the meantime, again, we thank all the panelists for their excellent testimony. Thank the commissioners for their terrific comments and questions, and we will reconvene at 12:40. The session is now closed. Stephen, we're about a minute away. Are we prepared to resume?
I'm back, Bob. Thank you.
Hey, Dana. Stephen, are you out there? It sounds like we are prepared to resume.
Yep, I think we're ready. I think Commissioner Feldman might not be able to speak right now. It says he needs to enter in his PIN. But other than that,
Commissioner Feldman's on the line.
Perfect.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, and Elliot, are you out there?
I'm still out there.
Okay. All right, I think we're ready then, Stephen.
General Counsel's on.
Welcome back, everybody, from what I hope was an enjoyable lunch. This is the Consumer Product Safety Commission's public hearing on its commission agenda and priorities for FY 2021 and FY 2022. Our final panel consists of 5 presenters: Nancy Coles from Kids in Danger, Crystal Ellis, who is a member of Parents Against Tipovers, Margaret Lewis, Survivors for Good, Kimberly Amato, Megan's Hope, Janet McGee, Parents Against Tipovers. Ms. Coles, would you begin?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Terrific. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak today on the agenda and priorities for the next 2 years. I really appreciate the flexibility to set up a virtual hearing. Kids in Danger is dedicated to keeping children safe by fighting for product safety. Here are our recommendations for the CPSC agenda and priorities in the coming 2 years. COVID-19 has and will continue to have a profound effect on product safety. All CPSC staff is working remotely, testing in the lab has been halted, and CPSC personnel are not at the ports. It is unclear what impact it is having on investigations of dangerous products. Recalling companies are unable to respond adequately to requests for recall participation, increasing the likelihood that some of those products will remain in use. At the same time, it is inevitable that remote work and schooling will increase the risk that children will be injured by common household hazards such as those I cover in my testimony. We urge the CPSC to find ways to gauge and evaluate injury rates in a timely manner, as well as develop plans to mitigate these risks with stronger enforcement and strengthened standards. There's one point I believe all stakeholders agree upon. The CPSC does not have adequate resources to fulfill its mandate of protecting consumers from unreasonable risk of harm. We would urge the CPSC to request and Congress to grant a budget of no less than $350 million. For too long, this agency has been forced to compromise on the safety of consumers, especially children, based on funding. Current funding is a little over half of what the FDA has to regulate animal food and medicine. Fully funding the agency will pay off in the long run in reduced healthcare costs and lost income from preventable injuries. Through the implementation of the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act and Danny's Law, Section 104, the CPSC has successfully developed strong mandatory standards for 23 types of durable infant and toddler products. We appreciate the amount of time, energy, and knowledge that CPSC staff dedicate to this task. The 3 open rules right now, expansion gates, crib bumpers and liners, and infant sleep products will be addressed in this coming period of time. We applaud the efforts that CPSC has taken to strengthen these standards to protect children and encourage work to continue to publish final rules soon. The NPR on infant sleep products, which expands the previous proposed standard addressing infant inclined sleep products to include all infant sleep products not currently covered by another standard, is a step that KID has been urging for years. Any product intended for infant sleep should not be sold without meeting a mandatory standard. We hope that the CPSC will prioritize eliminating unsafe infant sleep products such as inclined products and recall any that remain in homes or on the market. In addition, guidance should be added to CPSC's small business guidance webpage to discourage small companies from entering this market, unaware of the research that has found this type of product unsafe. Currently, when a user selects infant inclined sleep product in the regulatory robot, the information directs visitors to the ASTM standard, and says a mandatory standard based on that voluntary standard is coming soon. There is no word at all of the danger that these products pose or the new direction of the proposed rule. We believe the current NPR, adopted unanimously by the Commission, provides a pathway to eliminating padded crib bumpers that pose a suffocation risk from the market. KID will submit comments on the NPR separately, but just want to say that a standard that doesn't fully address the risk and gives a false sense of safety to parents is more dangerous than no standard at all. Part of the CPSIA requires companies to provide prepaid product registration cards and a way to register online. While those are minimum requirements, we ask that the CPSC work with stakeholders.
1 minute remaining.
New and more effective forms of registering, or use existing list of product owners, such as those held by retailers, company loyalty programs, or other data to reach consumers directly. It's been over 10 years since this requirement was implemented. The CPSC should evaluate data from recalls conducted since that time to determine its effectiveness and barriers to direct notification. The resulting research should be publicly available to encourage others to develop new approaches as well. One of the most innovative new tools in CPSIA was saferproducts.gov. It has great potential to educate consumers on hazards and recalls, as well as provide vital information to CPSC and manufacturers about product hazards. More should be done to analyze the data on the site and share the resulting reports with the public. Last fall at a panel at the International ICPHSO conference, one of the presenters, Sam Cromie, a professor at Trinity College, presented on key elements of a reporting system. He spoke of the need to make it intuitive, responsive, and engaging. Everything Safer Products is not. I urge CPSC to work with such experts to improve the interface of saferproducts.gov, as well as how it is presented to consumers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ms. Crystal Ellis, a member of the Parents Against Tip-Overs.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, my name is Crystal Ellis. I am speaking today as a mother who's lost her child to a tip-over tragedy. I'd like to begin by saying thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak today, especially in this unprecedented time with the pandemic. I hope you're all doing well and staying safe. Our group, Parents Against Tip-Overs, with your help and others, has had our voice amplified to bring more light to the issue of the danger of furniture tip-overs. We've gained momentum with the Sturdy Act, passing through Congress and now in front of the Senate. However, with the current COVID-19 crisis, the legislative approach has begun to stall. We need the help of the CPSC even more now. In June 2014, my son, Camden Ellis, was the 7th child to die that we know of due to unstable dressers made by IKEA. At the time, I thought this was a freak accident, and I had no idea this was a danger in my home. When I discovered that he was not only the 7th child to die because of the negligence of this particular manufacturer, the recall, but that children were dying at the rate of every 10 days, it was absolutely devastating. I know there are many other parents in this country that also have no idea their dresser is a risk in their home. They assume, as I did, that any product that's sold to consumers in the United States of America has been vetted and tested by their government and would not be sold if it could kill us. Tip-over deaths are a crisis that needs to be immediately addressed. Not enough has been done to keep children safe today. With the COVID-19 mandatory shelter-in-place orders, children are at even greater risk. Dressers continue to be unanchored for many reasons, and as you know, over 90% of tip-overs happen in a child's home. In my opinion, there are still several factors that are keeping unsafe dressers in our home. First is 6B. Commissioner Kay said it best when he said people die because of 6B. It's as simple as that. We have no idea why this rule is legal while there are no similar restrictions on sister agencies or proof that it's acting as intended. Some lawmakers continue to argue we need to keep 6B to protect the manufacturers from the CPSC and even each other. There's simply not enough data to support this theory. The original reasoning for the enactment of 6B is tied to a misstatement by the FCC and shouldn't have been tied to a punishment for the CPSC and the American consumer. The CPSC has not released unproven information to my knowledge. Even in the case of the data breach, factual information was released about the fatal risks of inclined sleepers that should have been given to the public a decade ago. We need to eliminate 6B to protect consumers, the constituents. The restriction of information prevented my family from even having a chance to know that our dresser was unsafe. If a manufacturer's product is causing injuries or death or the potential for such outcomes, recall. Let me as the consumer know, and I will decide how I will use that information for my family. I spoke on this issue in February at the ICPSO annual meeting with several others, and the bottom line is we have to do what's best to protect the consumer. The CPSC is tasked with protecting us, and the rule ties your hands. I'm personally speaking about and advocating for the legislation introduced by Bobby Rush of Illinois, the Share Information Act. I'm also advocating for an increased budget for the CPSC. Your tiny budget's not enough to effectively protect consumers and advocate for us. First and foremost, your agency has to be big enough presence that people know who you are and that you're the place to go to ask for help with consumer product issues. This leads me to my next concern, the effectiveness of recalls. I'm encouraged by the recent increase in dresser recalls. However, more should be done to push manufacturers to make a recall the most effective it can be. If they know how to market and sell a product to millions of consumers, then they know how to get the message of a recall to those same consumers. Being allowed to offer an anchor kit instead of a full return is a deadly mistake. That message was tried by IKEA and it killed Ted McGee. That ineffective recall eventually led to the death of Joseph Dudek. Also, I continue to argue if a dresser is, according to the manufacturer, meeting the voluntary standard, but is still killing children, it should be recalled. This is clear evidence our product is still not safe for consumers.
1 minute remaining.
I'd like to address the standard making process for dresser safety. The most recent ASTM ballot to vote on Chairman Burkle's recommendations of raising the test weight to 60 pounds and lowering the height to 27 inches, as well as the clarifying phrase up to and including the age of 5, to say including children up to 72 months old, only passed on the issue of 27 inches. It continues to ignore the risk calculated by weight and age and dynamic force. I'm also disappointed that CSUs are not added to Section 104 rulemaking. As both Commissioner Adler and Commissioner Kay pointed out, just because we cannot save all with this solution does not mean we should not save some. Many of the parents I work with bought their dressers from stores selling only marketed children's products. They believed, as many consumers do, that buying these children's dressers is an increased level of safety. Please continue to fund saferproducts.gov with the suggested changes by consumer advocates and users, because it's a chance for information without the full repeal of 6B to reach consumers. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak today, and I'm hopeful that we can continue to work together to make progress in stopping tip overs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ellis. Margaret Lewis. Ms. Lewis.
Chairman Adler.
We can hear you.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. So Chairman Adler, Commissioners Fay, Biacco, and Feldman, I want to thank each of you for this opportunity to testify and hear directly from the voice of consumers. My name is Margaret Lewis. I represent Survivors for Good, and many of us are survivors of burn injuries. Our nonprofit focuses on public safety, prevention, education, and solutions. Our advocacy group is called Not Your Turn to Burn. Survivors for Good and Not Your Turn to Burn were forged by PhDs, MDs, and advocates after spending years researching and working on prevention from unsafe consumer-grade fuel containers of highly flammable liquids. Unfortunately, my family suffered from a hazardous biofuel container, but this is the exact same hazard regardless of which flammable liquid is inside the container. I'm here to highlight a very primal fear that we all share, that is being burned alive. How did innocently making s'mores on our front porch become a horror, which still haunts my family, and my identical twin daughters. In June of 2014, I became a survivor when I followed indescribable screams to my front porch, where I saw one of my twin daughters in flames from her nose to her toes. I instinctively pulled her to my chest, but I cannot adequately describe the pain and horror. I can give you a firsthand account of placing my hands on the flames to smother them, but they reignited. Why, you may ask? Because I was not able to fully deoxygenate them. Her skin was immediately charged, and it was the fascia underneath that had become fuel. You see, her soft tissue was fully on fire. In figure 1 below, you'll see examples of my hands and my clothes. No one should carry the memories of hearing, seeing, feeling, smelling, and tasting their child's flesh on fire. It is etched into all 5 of my senses. But I'm just one mom. I'm here to represent the thousands of moms, dads, spouses, partners, siblings, parents, and guardians, just like me, that have had their loved ones injured in the exact same manner every year. Some examples: a father in Michigan that was put in jail, unable to attend his daughter's funeral. A teacher that was charged criminally in Colorado, or publicly another one was vilified in New York. A first responder that was burned to death in North Carolina, or an off-duty police officer in Florida that received TBSA, total body surface area, over 90% of his body. So we collectively pose this question to you. Why are consumer products currently being sold to the most vulnerable population? Consumers. They have no training, they have no knowledge, and the exact opposite. All those in commercial, industrial, and all branches of the military all have standards which require the barrier, the safety guard on their products. Here are the facts. Flame arresters are commercially available today. Fuel containers without a flame arresting device are unsafe. So we respectfully request you to prioritize this issue due to the frequency, severity, cost, and potential occurrences. Frequency, easily 4,000 to 11,000 burns annually. There's 3 yardsticks used for that comparison. Severity, these are life-altering, and there's high mortality. Often these require more than 50 surgeries involving extremely painful skin grafting. That means you have to be skinned alive to save your life. The lifetime of pain and suffering, how do we measure? For some, this is known as a social death because they no longer participate in society. The costs are anywhere from 1 million to 10 million in direct medical costs per patient. I have documented and submitted cases that average over 2 million per severe injury. Potential occurrences, according to Manufacturers Association, there are over 100 million
1 minute remaining
containers in use today and on the market. Each product without a flame arrestor has the same potential. So thankfully, you've done a lot with flame arresters. I just want to point out that this is still a Russian roulette for consumers. Most importantly, I want to point out that common use is not misuse. Refilling in droplets, touching a hot muffler is reasonable. Doing science demonstrations is foreseeable. The standards of care and engineering need to be applied. So my request, let's find language for public safety. Let's really look at the voluntary standard process. It's not effective. This committee was formed in 2005. We've since seen too many products getting separated and divided out. We have manufacturers trying to remove this safe, effective metal flame arrestor without evidence of a single documented case of it ever failing. We have thousands of containers, and none of them have ever had exposures. Lastly, I want to focus on utilizing the reference existing data standards, education and public safety campaigns, and most importantly, I ask you to send a letter to the Senate supporting the immediate passage of the Portable Fuel Container Safety Act of 2019. Thank you all.
Ms. Lewis, thank you so much. Kimberly Amato, Megan's Hope.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Excellent. My name is Kimberly Amato, and I'm the founder of Megan's Hope. 15 years ago, on December 18th, 2004, I woke to my husband frantically screaming my name. Our beautiful 3-year-old twin daughter, Megan, was found lifeless beneath her dresser. I've been fighting literally since the day she died to educate others about the dangers of furniture tipovers in advocating for a mandatory furniture safety standard. I've been actively engaged with Congress, ASTM, and the CPSC since just a few months after her death. And quite frankly, I am beyond frustrated that this issue has still not been adequately addressed by these entities, and children continue to be injured and killed by furniture tip-overs every single day. Today, I thank the Commission for its dedication to furniture safety and ask that you continue to make it a top priority by number one, aggressively pursuing rulemaking for a robust, effective, and comprehensive mandatory furniture safety standard. I beg of you to issue an NPR and to make it an urgent priority. It's been 3 years since the ANPR was announced. The STURDY Act, the ASTM voluntary standards process, and progress on an NPR can and should all happen concurrently. We cannot wait any longer for someone else to create a comprehensive mandatory standard. ASTM has already had 20 years, and we all know where that has gone. The time is now. The job is yours. Number two, continue to improve and promote the Anchor It campaign in both its scope and its reach. The tone of the campaign needs to be a serious one and use real-life stories and images to engage parents, for we know that is what has the greatest impact. Number three, increase the scope, reach, and public awareness of saferproducts.gov in order to get more accurate and timely data, and by expanding who's required to report product hazards, injuries, and deaths beyond the NICE hospital system. Number four, the Commission needs to issue timely warnings and safety alerts and use its full authority and every tool at its disposal to recall furniture that is not compliant with the current standard, issue unilateral recalls if necessary, and impose civil penalties where appropriate to get dangerous furniture off the market and adequately inform the American public about a hazard or recall so they know what to do to protect their family. The issue of furniture tip-over remains a clear and present danger to the citizens of the United States, especially our most vulnerable, our children and elders. It's a hazard that exists in every single household, as well as in schools, daycare centers, nursing homes and assisted livings, hotels, church halls, classrooms, retail stores, and other public spaces, making the anchoring campaign a vital component of tip-over prevention and education. The agency also desperately needs to improve their avenues of communication to reach the American public. Recall information and safety campaigns don't save lives if parents and the public don't know about them. If these processes and standards were in place 15 years ago, I'd still have my beautiful Maggie, and hundreds of thousands of injuries and deaths due to furniture tip-overs could have been prevented. You are the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Priority number one is to educate and protect consumers, no matter who the chair is and no matter what the political makeup of the commission is. I assure you, furniture falls equally on Democratic and Republican children. This is not a partisan issue. It's not about protecting industry interests. That's not your job. It's purely an issue of safety, and consumer safety is your mandate. Megan's twin brother is graduating from high school next week. She should be right there next to him. Instead, once again, I'm going to see one where two should have always been. Those twin milestones were all stolen from me the day she died, along with the innocence of my boys and the joy of Christmas, by a small, heavy, expensive dresser made for a nursery that I thought was safe. I promised Megan she'd be the last to die this way. She was not. More than 250 children have died since, all while your agency, Congress, ASTM, and the furniture industry have fought for their own interests over the lives of our children and waited for someone else to do the work and create the solution to end tip-overs. When Megan wanted to get your attention, she'd climb into your lap, take your face into her tiny little hands, and make you look right at her. And she'd say, "You listen to Meggie." Close your eyes for a moment. Picture her sitting in your lap right now, her tiny hands on your face. Imagine looking into her eyes and hearing her plea. I beg of you, Commissioners Adler, Biacco, Feldman, and Kay, please listen to Maggie. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Amato. Janet McGee, Parents Against Tip-Overs.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. I'm Janet McGee, a founding member of Parents Against Tipovers, our national coalition that was created in 2018 by a group of parents who have all lost their children from furniture tipovers. We at Parents Against Tipovers would like to urge the Commission to keep furniture tipovers your highest priority in these upcoming fiscal years. While we see progress is slowly being made, we believe it just isn't moving quickly enough. We've gained great momentum on learning more about tipovers and exploring possible solutions, but we feel it's time for further action because children across the nation remain vulnerable to dresser tipover incidents, especially given many states' stay-at-home orders due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And as we all know, over 90% of tipover fatalities happen within the home. As we explore priorities moving forward, revisiting the Section 104 rulemaking would be high as we see it. While it will not solve the tipover problem entirely, it will cover thousands of dressers that are problematic today and is at least some level of progress. Of the non-IKEA dresser deaths that have happened among our Parents Against Tipovers members, almost all of them were purchased at a reputable juvenile product store and marketed for infant child use. We encourage you to reintroduce the Section 104. We would also like to see the dresser testing that the CPSC is currently undergoing remain a top priority so it can be used to determine final rulemaking. We would like to see the dresser testing process be more transparent as well and better communicated with stakeholders. And additionally, we would like to urge you to leverage our experience in your research. For example, last fall, Pat learned at the ASTM meeting for F1542 that the CPSC would be conducting home studies as part of this research, yet we as parents were never asked any input. And we had to question why were parents who have nationally spoken out on furniture tipovers not involved in this. Unfortunately for us, we are a growing group of subject matter experts on tipovers. So we urge the Commission to continually consider incorporating as many resources as possible, including PAT parents, into your studies whenever possible. While we understand that the dresser testing process takes time, we feel the CPA is simply not moving fast enough or using every tool possible to expedite this final rule. The clothing storage unit tipover and ANPR was created in 2017, and to date, very little visible progress has been made. We believe the CPSC commissioners all agree now that the ASTM subcommittee F1542 is not solving this problem on its own, and it must be put back in the hands of the CPSC to set the safety standard for furniture stability. So now it's time for some action. We just ask for your public support of the Sturdy Act as you continue working on that final rulemaking and collecting that data. Pat has been meeting regularly with the Anchorage staff, and we appreciate the opportunity to have open communication with this team. We continue to voice our concern about the CPSC's odd social media tone and have expressed concern over the effectiveness of it. We do appreciate that the topic of furniture tipovers has been excluded from most of this odd messaging. However, we believe it's time to revise the Anchor It campaign. There's a huge opportunity to incorporate not only our real stories from parents who are willing to speak out, but also individuals who've experienced a near miss who can reach a greater audience, much like Commissioner Biacco's interview with former NFL pro Brian Dawkins at Super Bowl time last February. We have been encouraged by the dresser recalls that have taken place in recent months, but we would ask the CPSC to continue to apply pressure to a company to take these units back instead of only handing out an anchor kit as a repair. We all witnessed IKEA's repair solution to be ineffective when it took my son Ted's life in 2016. As we move into the next fiscal year ahead in uncharted COVID-19 territory, we look forward to seeing tipovers remain one of your highest priorities. After all of the work that has been done to lay this solid foundation of solving the tipover issue, please do not slow down. Pat will continue to offer our experiences, insight, and assistance in any way we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank all of the panelists. I did want to make, again, note of the fact of the parents who are here recounting the tragedies that they've experienced and demonstrating to me incredible courage and presence in sharing their tragedies and seeking to improve product safety. You've done it in a very thoughtful way, you've done it in a measured way, and you've done it in a technically competent way. We could ask no more of you, and we thank you so much for that. What I would like to do at this moment is to ask Crystal, Kim, and Janet. You've been you've experienced terrible tragedies, and my understanding is none of you had any inkling that the furniture in your homes could tip over as easily as they did. So we've now been spending a number of years in which we've done our best to alert consumers of the risk of tip overs in the homes. And of course, we could always do better, but do you have a sense that education efforts so far have been successful in notifying parents of tip over hazards in a significant sense? And if not, do you have any concrete suggestions for us? And I'd ask that of the three of you.
This is Janet. I can take that one. I think that education with this issue is just simply not enough. The only way to really spark action is to make it relatable to parents, and seeing a warning is just not relatable. And unfortunately, they're not going to get the message unless it happens to them or they experience a near miss. And so that's why it's so important to design the safety into the product and not rely on this educational campaign. Perhaps Kim can speak more to that because she's been dealing with this for much longer than I have.
Yes, definitely. I think education is important and it's necessary, but I think we need to expand who's doing the education. I've done a lot of speaking with pediatrician groups and Department of Children and Family Services. And these are people who interact with at-risk families with children every single day. And some of them didn't know what the risks truly were or what to do about it. So I think we have to think about who we are trying to educate and what we need to educate them about. And I think there could be a lot of partnerships or collaborations that could happen with those groups on a state-by-state level that might help to that end. And I echo what Janet said. I can tell you from social media posts alone, if I post something that has a picture and a very emotional story about a child who died or had a near miss, people share it, people talk about it, people want to know how to secure their furniture. But if I share, the little meme from the Anchor It campaign, I get nothing. It's crickets. So we have to think about how we're getting that message out there as well and what works.
Hi, this is Crystal Ellis. I just wanted to say I echo the sentiments of my colleagues. However, I have also been reaching out to National PTA as a group that to educate parents about this issue. The problem is again, at a state-by-state level, we are encountering people, if they have heard about it, many of them are encountering the problem of landlords not allowing them to anchor their furniture. So even if they know how to anchor or they have the tools, now these high-risk families are risking losing their deposit. So it goes back to education, 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 but in the end, the Sturdy Act is what's going to be the solution. And then state-by-state legislation for anchoring in public spaces. Thank you.
Thank you all, and I do want to assure you that I consider a rule on tip overs to be one of my, if not my highest priority, and I thank you all for that. Ms. Coles, I know that Kids in Danger has long monitored our process in pursuing recalls, and you've had some very good suggestions along those lines, but could I ask you to amplify things that CPSC could be doing to make our recall efforts more successful?
I think like so much at CPSC, and thank you.
1 minute remaining.
Thank you for this question, as it's, obviously the core of our mission. It is that sunshine helps any issue. So better information to consumers, more information to consumers, more making sure the direct notification is improved. As was just said about other education campaigns, making sure you're working with partners, retailers, all kinds of, baby registries. There's all kinds of places where we can reach parents who want to learn about recalls. And I think, frankly, that what would be most effective is to have strong corrective action plans with each manufacturer and hold them to accomplishing what's in that plan. We know from what we see of the data we do get, which is often redacted, that most children's products, we're still looking at 10 to 30% effectiveness rate of their activities. That leaves, even if you count for being thrown out, too many products still in home and in use.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lewis. I'm sorry I didn't get to you, but I did want to say that I think burn injuries are among the most horrific that anyone can experience. And I say that as somebody who has a close family member who was burned horribly as a young child and still suffers to this day. At this point, Commissioner Kaye, any questions or comments that you have?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the panelists on the third panel for making this work. We're really grateful for your testimony. I wanted to follow up on something we discussed in the first panel that you may or may not have been privy to, which is basically how do we change the dynamics that exist. All of you are testifying either here or in different fora that cover these issues and have been doing so for years. On both issues, the consumer grade fuel container issue and on the tip over issue, there have been efforts ongoing, especially in the voluntary standards arena, that have been unsuccessful for just more than a decade. And so starting with Ms. Coles, what do we do to change things? What can we do collectively so that you and your fellow panelists and those that we heard from earlier today are not going to be here next year and the year after and the year after that asking for us to keep doing these things?
Thanks for the question, and we'll still be here. We'll think of new things to ask for when you solve all these problems. But I think that, you know, I mentioned it, other people have mentioned it, fully funding CPSC to be able to adequately do their job would make a huge difference. And then using all the tools at your disposal. So we've seen with the current acting chairman, his willingness to go forward with warnings on a product when the company won't willingly agree to recall it. That has in many cases led to recalls eventually. So while, you know, 6B stands in the way of a lot of progress, we heard from NAM how seriously they take protecting that. There is much that could be done within the parameters of 6B to still get information to consumers about dangerous products.
Thank you.
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
please go ahead.
On that, I agree that 6B is the big issue, the big elephant in the room here. But piggybacking on what Nancy said, using all your tools available and increasing your budget are going to go a long way. But also continue to publicly speak out and educate people on 6B and tell them that it's hurting your ability to do your job when you're confronted by Congress.
Commissioner Kaye, it's
Ms.
Kim
Lewis?
Amato. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, Ms. Amato. That's okay. I didn't know if Ms. Lewis wanted to jump in.
That's okay. Go ahead if she wants to.
Sure. To me, I think one of the things that's hard for CPSC sometimes is to get out of the place of defend or deny, and I can only imagine how hard your job is. But if you were to just look at it objectively, you know, we've got a letter from the Manufacturers Association. They're supporting a lot of this. You know, they want a standard that reduces their liability. One standard applied equally makes it a level playing field. Unfortunately, it's a big margin hit if you're the only company that wants to step up and put it on. Voluntary standard doesn't work in this case. Taxpayers' money, I mean, we're talking $1 billion a year if there's only 1,000 of these injuries, and if those only cost $1 million, that's $1 billion we could save. So to me, one of the things would be to enact it immediately. You have an ANPR that was enacted in 2011 that, or at least the announcement of it, I don't think that's been finalized. I look at how hard it's been to get good data. You know, I appreciate the NIST reporting, but I don't think when I've submitted documents showing you how many are found in general newspaper articles, all that was dismissed when CPSC went forward publicly. So, you know, I think it's time to get the accuracy. I think it's good that we also let some of the parent advocates lead the way. So CPSC isn't on the hook. You don't need to become the firing range, you know, if
1 minute remaining.
Step forward. And then let me go back to Ms. Amato.
Thank you, Ms. Margaret. I was just going to piggyback actually on what Margaret said about the data. I mentioned saferproducts.gov. I think there are tremendous improvements that can be made to the reporting by having not just select emergency rooms report, but educate all doctors how to report and where and why, medical examiners to report where if a product was involved. You know, there's so much more information that can be gathered on saferproducts.gov, but people don't know it exists and they don't know how to use it. And everybody says we don't have enough data. I don't think we're asking for the right kind of data, and that's why we don't have it.
Thank you, Ms. McGee. In the last 5 seconds.
Yes, I think the biggest thing that I would like to see is some level of progress being made. So like section 104, for example, that was something that would have been a win. And we could have made some progress.
Great. Thank you so much to everybody.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Biacco.
Thank you, Chairman Adler, and hello to everyone. I know each and every one of you, and I wish we could see each other in person, but it's nice to hear your voices, and I hope that you and your families are doing well throughout this pandemic. Thank you again for being here and sharing your stories with us. Mrs. McGee, thank you for your positive comments on the series with Brian Dawkins. I thought he was terrific, and I thought using his story and who he was in the connection to the Super Bowl was really a good way and a different way to get people to listen to the message. I cannot agree more that we need more partnerships on lots of issues, not just this one, lots of issues, more campaigns, new campaigns, and it is one of the most frustrating things that I've been involved in since arriving at the commission is having my ideas on how to change the CPSC's education campaign and the new ways to get messages out, having that fall on deaf ears, including as recent as last week. I got so frustrated with having new ideas and broader ideas being rejected out of hand that I had to remove myself from the call because I was so angry. So I do hear what you're saying. I do support that. I do support stronger standards with regard to tip overs and to the voluntary and or mandatory standard, and I know everybody's positions on the 104s and what have you, but the bottom line still remains that this voluntary standard process has dragged on beyond belief, and there's got to be a better way to do this. And if I say any more, I will be repeating myself again. So I will just thank you all for being here and for sharing your stories and you know, calling us where we need to be called on.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Feldman, questions or comments?
Thank you very much, and I'll be brief, but I do want to thank all of you on the panel for being here today. I've had an opportunity to meet and work with all of you, and I'm continually impressed with the dedication that you all bring to your advocacy. These aren't easy stories to tell, but they're your stories. And these priority hearings, like we're having today, are statutorily mandated, but at the same time, really an invaluable opportunity for the commission to hear directly from Americans to help shape our agenda and to marshal our resources effectively and responsibly. I'll be brief. I don't have any specific questions, but I want to reiterate that we wouldn't be able to accomplish our mission without input from all stakeholders, and I look forward to working with all of you going forward. So thank you very much. Stay safe.
And thank you very much. So at this point, I want to reiterate what my colleagues have said from the heart. Thank you all to the panelists for your thoughtful and substantive comments. They've been enlightening. They've been helpful. I wrote down a bunch of thoughts that you triggered, and I'm going to follow up on them. So thank you so much. I also want to thank CPSC staff for a flawless technical support of this hearing, specifically Steve McGugan for showing us all how to use GoToWebinar and for his support during the hearing. And finally, Alberta Mills for so sweetly but firmly keeping us on time. So thank you for that. And finally, I want to thank my fellow commissioners for thoughtful questions and comments. I think you've demonstrated a spirit of collegiality, cooperation that's needed in these very, very difficult times. I do want to remind everyone that we are going to keep the record open for additional comments or for questions from the commissioners. And with that, I'm going to declare this hearing closed. I want to wish everybody a very safe and healthy rest of the week. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank